Okay, welcome everybody. Today we're going to have a friend from Brazil, Luis Felipe Demetrio, a PhD student from the University or Universidad Estadual de Londrina. He's going to speak about two-fluid canonical quantum cosmology. So, Demetrio, go ahead.
Okay, so first I'd like to thank you all for inviting me. I think that I'm the first Brazilian to present here on Future of Physics. Is that correct? I'm the first, so it's quite an honor. Thank you very much. And
The
today
first
I'll
of
talk to
many,
you
of
about...
course.
Huh?
The first of many.
Exactly, that's the spirit, right? So I'll talk to you about this two-fluid canonical quantum cosmology model. By the way, if you have any questions, you can feel free to interrupt me at any time to ask those questions, because I want the presentation to be very, very fluid. Actually, due to the topic that I will present, I think that the presentation is going to be too fluid, if you understand what I'm saying. So let's begin. First, I would like to discuss some introduction and motivations, okay? So let's start. So this work was considering the quite recent, quite new paradigm that one can use vacuum fluctuations to describe and make predictions about both the large-scale structure of our universe and the CMB temperature spectrum, okay? This is a very recent idea. It was first considered by Mukhanov, Shibsov, and Hawking in the 80s. And how does one do that? Well, one usually considers a usual Friedmann-Lemaitre-Robertson-Walker, FLRW, or Friedmann metric, plus quantum perturbations. And this leads to CMB predictions. That's our program, so to say. But as everyone knows, quantum perturbations, vacuum fluctuations, if you may, are very small stuff. They're very little things. So one needs a mechanism to amplify said perturbations to implement this idea. We use quantum physics to describe cosmological scales. And this is usually performed in inflation. So I'll discuss inflation a bit. So we know also that the primordial power spectrum of adiabatic perturbations is well described by a power law, like this expression, with an S equals 0.964. And this is consistent with inflation. So it's a kind of success of the inflationary paradigm. And it also has the objective to solve some initial condition problems of the lambda CDM mode, which include the horizon problem, flatness problem, and the origin of cosmological perturbations. There is also in this category the singularity problem, which inflation does not solve. It does not even try to solve it. Says nothing about the singularity problem. And I put this alleviates in red because inflation does not really completely solve these initial condition problems. And why is this so? Because you still need to assume that space-time had a small patch where it was a Friedman-like universe, homogeneous and isotropic, in order to solve these problems. I'll discuss this a bit in more detail. So let's delve more into the inflationary paradigm. So inflation's aim would be to convert general initial conditions on the geometry on the kind of special FLRW initial conditions that we observe in the CMB. Einstein's equations, we have lots and lots, infinite possibilities of geometries that solve Einstein's equations. So homogeneous and isotropic geometries are very special solutions to Einstein's theories. So we'd like to convert those more general kind of geometries on the special ones that we observe. So for instance, one would like to show that both the anisotropy, the sigma j, and the special curvature Q are diluted by inflation. And this is indeed achieved at background level. You can show that at background, the background is isotropized and also the curvature is diluted, but this does not occur at perturbative level. Why? Because at perturbative level, one is considering perturbations evolving on this kind of geometry and need to quantize perturbations. And to quantize perturbations on a covered spacetime, you have to define appropriate vacuum state. This is non-trivial both for backgrounds that have curvature and for the Bianchi-1 anisotropic universe. So these problems are not completely solved at perturbative level. There are still open problems. And also in this situation, we have other problems like the Trans-Planckian frequencies problem. The fact is that inflation considered an exponential period of expansion, where frequencies, modes, wavelengths that are still inside the Planck length can be amplified to cosmological scales and be observed. But this is a huge problem because we don't really know how to deal with trans-Planckian physics. So inflation amplifies those scales to observable ones, and this is still an open problem. We also have the quantum to classical transition problem. The universe, the perturbations start in a quantum regime, but then we observe a classical universe nowadays. We don't really know how that happened, still an open problem. And there's also the necessity of a re-heating phase. Because after inflation, the universe is very, very cold and in a vacuum state. And one needs a mechanism to heat the universe, a re-heating period, so that the usual hot Big Bang evolution can take place. So we need to couple the inflation to the standard model, and we have lots and lots of freedom to do that. So inflation is not the final answer to these puzzles, and it is in this context that you can consider also what we call bouncing models. Bouncing models are a competitive paradigm to inflation that try to solve the same problems as inflation, but they focus on solving the singularity problem. It's their main objective, which inflation does not resolve. So it's a kind of a competitive paradigm. Now that I have motivated why to consider bouncing cosmologies, I'm ready to really start my presentation and discuss our bouncing two-fluid model. So let me first discuss the plan for this presentation that is starting right now. This was just a warm-up, right? So first, I'll need to discuss a bit about canonical quantum cosmology, canonical quantum gravity, if you may. In this situation, I need to discuss the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which is the master equation of canonical quantum gravity. Then I'll apply it to a single fluid model, just to get used to the process in canonical quantum gravity. And then I'll apply it to the two-fluid model that we have been studying. But one finds that the two-fluid model, it's very hard, very non-trivial to quantize. So we need a special quantization technique to do so, which is known as the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. I'll briefly outline this technique and discuss how one can use this to choose a set of initial conditions which are equivalent to a vacuum state and to a generalization of the usual double Cabet approximation. With this in mind, we can now apply set techniques to the two-fluid model and extract predictions, testable predictions. Then I'll discuss about the predictions, the mode evolutions of our model, and then the adiabatic entropy power spectrum for cosmological perturbations. So let's start. First, the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. It's okay. First, the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. What is it? Where does it live? What is this thing? Well, the idea is actually very simple. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation refers to the Schrödinger equation applied to the gravitational field, applied to Einstein's gravity. As we learn in undergraduate quantum mechanics, if one has a Hamiltonian, one can perform canonical quantization and write a Schrödinger equation for the quantum system. And the situation is the same in GR, because we have Einstein's equation, which one can derive from the Einstein-Hilbert action, but you can perform a Legendre transform on the Einstein-Hilbert action and write a Hamiltonian. If you perform now canonical quantization on this Hamiltonian, you can write a Schrödinger equation, and this is the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. It also has the more poetic name, the Einstein-Schrödinger equation. The poetics was the original name of this equation. And its explicit form is given by equation 1. The Hamiltonian will always annihilate every quantum state because GR is a totally constrained theory. So due to this property of GR, the Hamiltonian will always vanish, always annihilate every quantum state. And if you write it explicitly, you see that it has this explicit form given by equation 2, which is very nasty. And why is this so? This is due to the fact that you are going to get a very complicated functional differential equation with lots of ordering problems. This is due to the fact that the square root of h hat refers to the determinant of the special metric in GR. So the square root of the determinant of the special metric will be a very, very, very non-local operator. It's non-polynomial, very hard to deal with. So it's hard to make predictions with the Wheeler-DeWitt equation in the general case. Okay. I would like to point out that this scheme, this proposal to quantize gravity, is considered a conservative approach to quantize gravity in the sense that it's derived from the usual quantization techniques applied to constrained systems, but to GR. But we still don't know the exact domain of validity of canonical quantum gravity and the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. This is mainly due to the fact that the resulting full equation is very hard to use to make predictions in the general case. So in order to make predictions, definitive predictions, I'll need to assume some additional hypotheses, some simplifying assumptions. First, instead of quantizing all possible geometries, all possible solutions of GR, the superspace, I'll consider what we call a mini superspace approximation. The idea is that we're only going to quantize metrics, geometries that have certain symmetries, like homogeneity and isotropy, which we're already doing on cosmology. So we're going to consider this approximation to use the Wheeler-DeWitt equation. We also have what is known as the problem of time in quantum gravity. The Hamiltonian annihilates every quantum state, so that if you try to evolve a quantum state, its time evolution will be trivial, because the Hamiltonian will annihilate it. So we need to use something as time to evolve our quantum system. And to do so, we're going to use what we call a relational time, so that we're going to use an internal monotonic degree of freedom as time to parameterize our system. This is a bit abstract, but it will become clearer when I apply it to the single fluid case in just a few minutes. And finally, we also need to interpret the solutions, because the solutions of the Wheeler-DeWitt equation are going to be wave functions of the universe. How do you extract predictions from that? Because you see, you cannot really use the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics to this case due to two reasons. First, since the whole universe is quantized in these formalisms, there is no classical domain and no classical observer to collapse a wave function. So you cannot use in the Copenhagen interpretation in quantum cosmology. And even if you could implement a collapse, which you can't, but if you could, you'd get probabilistic predictions. But how does one test probabilities with only one single universe? It's at least non-trivial to do that. So we turn to this Bohmian interpretation, the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is very nice because it is a deterministic interpretation of quantum mechanics, but with non-local effects that reproduces the usual results of quantum mechanics in most of situations. The idea then is that we need to parameterize our wave function, the solution to the Wheeler-DeWitt equation as an equation 3, and we can extract deterministic trajectories using equation 4, known as Bohmian trajectories. So we have a deterministic trajectory with quantum effects, non-local effects, and this solves the use of probabilities, okay? So let's apply this to a definitive case. So let's implement this on the case of a single barotropic fluid with equation of state P equals W rho on a flat Friedmann metric. The super Hamiltonian, classical super Hamiltonian of GR coupled to these fluids given by equations 5 and 6. You can see that it has a geometric term associated to the scale factor A, and also a fluid-like term. It has a matter term here on the Hamiltonian associated to this momentum. And you can see that the momenta, the PT variable, you're seeing my mouse, right? Or not? I think yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this momenta, it appears linearly on the Hamiltonian, so that we can use these variables as a time variable. Still, it even has t, time. So we can use this variable, which is monotonic, by the way, to parameterize our evolution, and we can evolve our quantum state. So if we now perform canonical quantization on this Hamiltonian using said variable as time, we're going to get this Schrödinger equation, equation 7, which is the Wheeler-DeWitt equation for this model with one single barotropic fluid. And it's very remarkable that this is an equation of quantum cosmology applied to the wave function of the universe, and etc., but it reduced it to a free particle Schrödinger equation. This is a free particle Schrödinger equation.
Dimitro,
Okay,
a question.
please.
Why are you talking about quantum gravity? You are not working a fixed background, right?
No, fixed background. We are quantizing the dynamics of the background. So I would not say that the background is fixed, okay?
Okay.
This is what we call a background independent and non-perturbed approach to quantum gravity. So yeah, the background is not fixed. It's not like string theory, for instance. String theory, it's the background is fixed and it's a perturbative approach to quantize quantum gravity, okay?
Yeah, and for example, in calculations like also in inflation or in cosmology, they use fixed backgrounds sometimes, and they have a quantum field
Mm-hmm.
and they calculate, I don't know, expectation values of the
Yes,
field.
exactly.
And you are doing something different.
Yes. We are also going to do what you are saying, because in the end, we're going to calculate correlation functions of quantum fields evolving on certain geometry. But at this point, we're quantizing the dynamics of the background itself. So this is quantum gravity at its full. We're quantizing the background, okay? Then we're also going to quantize perturbations,
Okay.
okay? If you feel confused later in quantize perturbations, please tell me. We can discuss a bit more about this, okay? Thank you for your question, Fabio. So,
Sorry, Dimitri, I also have a nice question. The super Hamiltonian, then first, I have to ask, this super, I guess it's nothing to related with supersymmetry, of course, I guess.
no,
No?
no,
Okay,
not
okay,
today.
okay. I, I
Actually,
say, okay, first, and second, so is you call the super Hamiltonian the H0 plus the Hamiltonian of matter, you say, was, or which is this?
We use the terminology super Hamiltonian to a Hamiltonian that is considered on superspace. Superspace is the space of all possible metrics modulo diffeomorphism, okay?
Okay, but that's also my question, because superspace is for me it's something related that one define supersymmetry. So again, it's not related, no?
No, not related.
Okay.
The name is similar, but it's nice that you asked this so that you are not confused for the remaining of the presentation, right? But just to complement, to make it very clear, this H0 term refers to the geometrical term, the gravitational term, that it essentially comes from the Ricci scalar from Einstein reduction. And this HM refers to the matter term, which is associated with the fluid. Okay? So that's the idea.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Lucas, for a question also. And the other people who are watching, please feel free to ask any questions. I feel happy when you ask me questions, right? So let's continue. We now have this Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which reduces to a free particle Schrödinger equation, which I think we know how to solve for undergrad. So after solving this Wheeler-DeWitt equation and using the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation to quantum mechanics, we can extract a Bohmian trajectory for the scale factor. And when we do that, I'm going to discuss the predictions. You're in for a surprise, because we can derive a scale factor from that interpretation that has corrections from quantum effects, but it's a determinist solution. And this scale factor has a very nice property that it is non-singular. The singularity was removed by this approach to quantum gravity. So we have a non-singular scale factor. The first objective of the bouncing cosmological model was achieved, the first objective of the problem. But of course, we still need to compare the other predictions of the model with data, mainly to compare with the CMB data to see if it is a reasonable, physical, scientific model, right? So now, relating to Facundo's question, using this scale factor that we have derived by quantizing the background, we're going to evolve cosmological perturbations using this scale factor. So the perturbations, we are going to calculate the correlation functions and stuff using this scale factor. That's the main difference from inflation. Quantize also the background. So after calculating
Dimitri, a very silly question.
Where is no problem. There are no silly questions.
Where is the time dependence in the right side of the equation?
The time dependence.
That's the temperature, or is the time?
No, this t is the time. It's the time.
Okay, because I saw the little t and I got confused. Okay, sorry.
Time, we use this uppercase t because it's a time that is different from I think it's lowercase, right? Lowercase t. Oh, it's a typo here. There's a typo. This t is a typo. It should be capital T. So
okay.
It's confusing.
Okay, I was not crazy.
Anyway, so it's the same t and it refers to time, not to temper. Thank you, Lucas, for your question. I'll correct this later. But anyway, as I was saying, Facundo, please.
You found this A, or you propose it? I didn't understand.
I found it. It's because I had to skip some steps here, but the idea is this. We have this Wheeler-DeWitt equation, okay? So we solve this thing and we obtain a wave function for our universe. Okay, Facundo? So after deriving this wave function, we turn to the de Broglie interpretation, which is this interpretation in quantum mechanics, so that using said wave function, we can extract trajectories, determinist trajectories associated to a wave function. And using this interpretation, we get a differential equation that we can solve to derive that scale factor. So it's a solution to a differential equation. Okay?
Okay.
Nice. And
Thank you.
thanks for the question, because there are times where we skip some passages, and I want people to understand what I'm doing and what I'm proposing. Okay? So any more questions up until now? Or may I continue? I'll take that
Please
as
continue.
So, using this scale factor, we can now calculate correlation functions and compare the prediction with the CMB data. So we can show that in this single fluid model, we can extract a primordial power spectrum given by an approximate power law, just like in inflation, and we can relate the spectral index NS to the equation of state parameter of the fluid, but this relation is the W, the equation of state parameter. And there's a very non-trivial comment that I need to make. So first, this expression will only give the correct spectrum, correct power spectrum, NS equals 0.95, etc. if you have W negative, smaller than 0, and with a very small absolute value. But we don't really have many fluids which satisfy this property, right? What does this mean? This means that the single barotropic fluid model, the single fluid model that I'm presenting, needs some fine-tuning to describe the primordial spectrum. It has fine-tuning. So, what do we read from this consideration? That the single fluid model is discarded. It's just at most a toy model to describe the primordial spectrum that I have just shown you as an example before the two fluid model. But I would like to point out the following. Our first instinct, sort of say, would be like, okay, you presented your model and stuff, but it's wrong, so it's useless, right? Not really, because what I have just shown to you, was a quantum cosmological model based on quantum gravity that was discarded. And this is very nice, because we see that we can use data from primordial cosmology, mainly the CMB data, to discard proposals to quantum gravity, which is very important because at the present time, there are lots and lots of different proposals to quantum gravity, and we don't really know what is correct or not, because it's very hard to access the Planck scale directly. But we see that we can use these observations to constrain quantum gravity, which is very, very important. So this is a toy model, but keep this in mind because I will discuss this point again when I will discuss the predictions of the two fluid model. Okay, so we're probing quantum gravity, and that's nice. But let's go to the real thing now, the two fluid model. Oh, but first, this is the scale factor, time dependence that I have just shown to you. Oh, I put it here, small t. I should have taken a capital T also. Anyway, so we have a pre-Big Bang phase where the universe has a contraction. Then it approaches a bounce. It has a minimum value of the scale factor, and there's no singularity in this model. It's a contracting phase, and then the universe approaches the usual hot Big Bang evolution in the future. Okay, so this is the situation for the non-singular scale factor that I have just discussed. So now for the two fluid. So let's first write the two fluid Wheeler-DeWitt equation. This is the same. So we are considering two fluids now with dust, dark matter-like fluid with W approximately equals to 0 and radiation, W equals 1/3 on a flat Friedmann metric. Now the classical super Hamiltonian reads as an equation 10. You see now that we still, of course, have the gravitational term, the geometric term, but we have two matter terms, one related to radiation and one related to dust, to dark matter. And now we know how to play this game, right? We can perform canonical quantization and write the full Wheeler-DeWitt equation of the system. which is given by equation 11. So we perform the same approach as I have just discussed. We solve this equation of motion, find the wave function, and extract the moment trajectory from said wave function. And what will happen in the two fluid case is that, again, we can derive a scale factor. It's right this time, which is again non-singular. This scale factor has no singularity, and it also has a bouncing behavior, and it recovers the usual hot Big Bang evolution in the future, just like I told you. So at background level, the singularity problem is solved. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, but a contracting phase before the bounce is also able to alleviate the other problems that the inflation alleviates. So it's like the horizon problem, flatless problem. Those problems can be solved using contracting phase also. Anyway, so this phase factor has a contracting phase, a bounce, and then an expansion. But we need to go to the perturbative level in order to extract predictions and see if it's a reasonable quantum gravity scientific model. But when you analyze the perturbations, the dynamics of perturbations, you see that it's very non-trivial. And this is due to this following fact. If you expand the full Einstein-Hilbert action up to second order on perturbations, and you remove all boundary contributions, and you get only the terms that contribute to the dynamics of perturbations, you get this Hamiltonian. Here, the zeta refers to the adiabatic mode, adiabatic perturbations, and S to what we call the entropy perturbation. And you see that the Hamiltonian has three terms related to each perturbation, and also harmonic terms. But there is still a cross term, a momenta cross term. And what does this mean? It means that we have coupled perturbations in this model. And this is very, very bad. Why is this so? Because these perturbations are evolving on a Friedmann metric, which is a curved background. And when we perform quantum filtering in curved spacetime, we need to be more careful, more rigorous in quantizing our system, and we need to define a vacuum state to perform actual calculations. And one usually does that using free theory to quantize the system. I don't really know how to quantize coupled field theories in curved space. And if you stop to think, even in flat background, we usually consider the free field case because one is usually interested in calculating cross sections where the fields are free both in the past and in the future. So coupling makes things a lot harder. And if you do not believe me, this is a Hamiltonian, but I will also show you the equations.
Maestro,
please.
William here. I lost something. Why you making a perturbative approach right now? Because in the first fluid case, you just calculate the power spectrum with a scale factor. So I'm confused. Why you making a perturbative approach on the Hamiltonian?
Because I don't know if I was that clear at this point, but to derive this power spectrum, you need to make a perturbative approach. This power spectrum, it's a power spectrum, it's the Fourier transform of the correlation function of cosmological perturbations. I just skipped some steps because this was just a warm-up model for the true fluid case. But to have the scale factor, then using this scale factor, you use it to evolve cosmological perturbations on this background. And you, from those cosmological perturbations, that you can extract this power spectrum. But it's just like an inflation in this case. So there's no secret there. The hard thing is to do the same on the true fluid. Okay?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. So let's continue. So like I was saying, when you consider the dynamics of perturbations, you get these equations of motion from that Hamiltonian, where the needs refer to essentially the wave number of perturbations, which are inversely proportional to their wavelength. And we have couplings here. The orange couplings are proportional to set frequencies. Those terms are proportional to each other. And the purple ones, this epsilon is the coupling. This other type of coupling is proportional to the effective Hubble radius that appears in the equations of motion. So the equation of motion is still coupled, but in usual inflation, what one does is that one considers the sub-Hubble limit, the UV limit of your theory, where the skew is very large, so that the space-time the modes will feel like they are in Minkowski spacetime and will perform quantization in that regime. But by analyzing the structure of the equation of motion, you see that you cannot do that because these frequencies, of course, they are going to be very large in the sub-Hubble regime, but also will be these couplings because they are proportional to the frequencies and proportional to Q. So perturbations will still be coupled in the UV limit of our theory, on the sub-Hubble limit. So there is no escape. You need to choose a special technique to quantize your system. And okay, even if you did not want to quantize your system, you still need initial conditions to solve the system of equations. So you cannot solve them without initial conditions. So that even if you say, okay, I do not want to quantize a system, I just want to solve the equation of motion. Okay, but you need initial conditions anyway. So we're going to look for a set of initial conditions, vacuum initial conditions, in order to define appropriate vacuum states so that we can calculate the correlation functions of our theory. That's the idea. And to do so, I use this technique that I have told you about, the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. The zoom menu is appearing here, right in the front of this name. Does the name appear to you? It has disappeared. Nice. Anyway, so this is the Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. First, what is a Hamiltonian tensor? The Hamiltonian tensor, HAB, it's a matrix. It's a matrix of the coefficients of the Hamiltonian. Because if you parameterize the Hamiltonian, it is quadratic, you can parameterize it as a matrix acting on these key vectors, which are phase space vectors. They have coordinates and momentum. So the Hamiltonian tensor refers to the matrix of the coefficients of the Hamiltonian. And it is explicitly given by this block diagonal form. It's diagonal on the V, but it is non-diagonal on the T matrix because there is momenta coupling in this momenta sector. So perturbations are coupled, but we could look for new degrees of freedom which are not coupled. That's the idea of Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. We're going to try to diagonalize the Hamiltonian. So let's do this. We know how to do this. So we look for the eigenvalues and eigenvectors, linear algebra stuff, boring but linear algebra stuff. And if you change your new degrees of freedom to diagonalize your Hamiltonian, you're in for a surprise because you will see that you will get a new term so that perturbations will still be coupled. And this is due to the fact that the Hamiltonian tensor, its coefficients are all time dependent. So that even if you try to diagonalize your system, the canonical transformation that you would need to perform to diagonalize it will be time dependent. And the canonical transformation generates this additional term. But always not lost. Because this form is still better than the other one, but we still need to do an additional canonical transformation. This is due to the fact that this Hamiltonian still has what we call an UV problem, because if you study the equation of motion, the sub-Hubble limit, the UV limit, perturbations will still be coupled. If you do not believe me, take your time and write the equation of motion. But if we perform a further canonical transformation, we can remove the terms that lead to the sub-Hubble couple, so that we get this new form, equation 22. You do not need to pay attention to the details, but what you need to know is that this new Hamiltonian, these variables are not coupled in the UV limit, the sub-Hubble limit, so that we can use them to apply initial conditions and define a vacuum state, just like we do in inflation. And I would like to point out that this whole matrix that appeared, the Bij, gamma ij, tau ij, all depend linearly on the Mij matrix that I showed in the previous slide. So that if you calculate it, you get all matrices by linear operations and stuff. It's simple stuff. Okay, so we are now ready to quantize our system. And to do so, we shall assume a set of initial conditions, which are given by these equations 23 and 24. They are rather involved. You do not need to understand the details of said initial conditions, but on the idea. And what is the idea behind it? These A variables are defined in terms of the action angle variables associated to our diagonalizing variables. Explicitly, they're defined in terms of the action angles, the I and the theta, by this expression. That's the definition. And if you take a look at this prescription, this set of initial conditions, what you need to understand is that, first, those are a generalization of the usual double Cabi approximation that one considers in inflation or in the adiabatic vacuum states. Because in the WKB approximation, one considers an approximate plane wave as solution. These initial conditions are not exact plane waves because we have a plane wave term, the usual WKB term, but there are also additional terms associated to the couplings between perturbations. So this generalizes the usual WKB approximation and also leads to a generalization of the usual adiabatic vacuum state definitions, because it is defined in terms of the WKB approximation. And this holds for theories with n interacting fields. We're only going to apply to the two fluid case with two modes, the adiabatic and entropy one, but it works for n. And also another very important fact is that since we have quantizing two fields, we have two sets of initial conditions. And this will lead to two sets of correlation and annihilation operators. Okay? And explicitly, the physical intuition behind those initial conditions is the following. Consider first the free theory case, and you consider the initial condition where only one of the fields is oscillating, it's vibrating. Since the theory is not coupled, if one of the fields starts to oscillate but the other is not, the situation is going to stay like that, right? One of the fields will oscillate and the other will stay in its vacuum state. But since we have coupling here, the following will happen. One of the modes can start to oscillate, and the other one, due to the coupling, even if it is not oscillating at the beginning, will start to oscillate in a slower fashion due to the coupling. The mode that starts oscillating is called the dominant one, and the other one that will start to oscillate later through the coupling is called the subdominant. So we have two sets of initial conditions. Each set, one of the modes is dominant and the other one is subdominant, and this is implemented in the set of initial conditions that I have just shown. So using them, we are now ready to solve the equations of motion, and then, since we now have a vacuum state, we can extract the power spectrum of the cosmological perturbations, the correlation functions, and compare it with data. So these are the graphs of the mode evolution of our model. There's lots of information here, but on the first line, we have the evolution for the first initial condition, and on the second line, is the evolution for the second initial condition. On the third line, we have the various couplings for our system. So since we are meeting here on Zoom, I'm going to give you a zoom here in this last graph, okay? So zoom. Okay. So if you take a look at this graph first, this blue line refers to the frequency of the mode. So blue line is the frequency. And there is an instant of time where this blue line will be equal to the black line. The black line is the effective Hubble radius. So when they coincide, we say that the perturbation crosses the Hubble horizon. I think there's a question here. I have to go to... Okay, thank you very much, Steven. Thank you very much for participating. So... So this is the moment of horizon crossing, where the blue line is equal to the black one. So horizon crossing. But what is the most important here that I want to show here, the zoom, is that there is this coupling, this green coupling, the Aleph one, the sub-Hubble coupling, that is very strong here in the past, where we set the vacuum initial conditions. And this is very important because you see that in this two-fluid model, the coupling is very important, more powerful even than both the Hubble radius term and the frequency term. So it needs to be taken into account to quantize our system. You cannot skip it. By the way, I forgot to say to you, but this method can be applied to any theories with interacting modes, so that one can apply it also to multi-field inflation, for instance, where there are more than one inflaton, but they're coupled. And people usually assume the usual vacuum states, the Bank-Davis vacuum state for those kinds of model. But there are some cases where you need to pay attention to the subroutines. For instance, can you neglect the couplings? It's a very important analysis. Anyway, so I need to return to zero zoom. I discovered how to do it. Okay, so like I was saying, there is this moment of time where the blue line is equal to the black one, and this is the moment of horizon crossing. When the mode crosses the horizon, you can see here, for instance, in the first initial condition, approximately the entropy mode is dominant in the first initial condition, and the adiabatic mode is dominant in the second initial condition. Okay, at this horizon crossing moment, the entropy mode crosses the horizon and it freezes, it stops to oscillate. Okay, and since the entropy mode is dominant, its brother, the subdominant adiabatic mode, will also freeze after the entropy mode crosses the Hubble horizon. And it's the same here on the second initial condition. We have the adiabatic mode, it starts to oscillate and stuff. Then at this purple line, the frequency, the blue line here, is equal to the effective Hubble radius, so that the perturbation crosses the Hubble horizon and freezes. It stops to oscillate. And its brother, the subdominant one, will also stop to oscillate. So these are the evolutions of our mode. For those of you who work in cosmology, in inflation, you see that it's much non-trivial than the usual inflationary case, where you only need to pay attention to the frequency and the Hubble radius, no coupling. So it's non-trivial here. And now we're finally ready to perform the analysis of the power spectrum. But before, I'd like to analyze the 3 different regimes of this model. So what will happen is the following. If you take a look at the frequencies, these colorful lines are the frequencies for various modes with different values of, okay? So we have 3 different regimes here. We have first, before this vertical line, dust domination, dark matter domination. Then we have a transient, and then radiation domination. So for modes that have crossed the Hubble horizon during dust domination, just like this blue one, the power spectrum will have a behavior that is very similar to the dust power spectrum from the single fluid model that I have just shown. And you have a similar interpretation for modes that have crossed it during radiation domination, just like this one here in the. And we have a transient here, which will give the most interesting behavior for our power spectrum. So we have these 3 different regimes: dust domination, transient, and then radiation domination. And we have a similar interpretation here for the entropy mode on the right. Okay, so let me first discuss the power spectrum for the adiabatic modes. So this is the full power spectrum. Just like we're seeing, it has 3 different regimes. We have here dust domination, then it has radiation domination, and the transient that connects the 2 phases, the dust domination and radiation domination. You see that the amplitude drops here in the end, and this is due to the fact that the speed of sound of the adiabatic mode is inversely proportional to the power spectrum, so that the speed of sound of the adiabatic mode is very close to the dust-like speed of sound, 0, very small in the beginning, but it will change to a radiation-like speed of sound of 1/3, so that this will make the amplitude of the power spectrum have this drop. This is very nice because the single fluid model that I have just shown you had a blue tilt. It had not a red tilted spectrum that had a drop. But now we're able to achieve this drop with this transient between the 2 fluids, which is very important. By the way, let me give a zoom here on this set of scales, which are the scales that impact the CMB, the cosmic microwave background radiation, so that we can discuss. First, from the figure that I have just shown you and this other figure, you can see clearly that the spectrum, the blue line, is not given by an exact power law as in inflation. It is not. So one can ask himself, okay, you have the River power spectrum and stuff, but it is not a power law. So it's wrong, right? Not really. Because first, we can show that for some choice of parameters, this power spectrum, its linear fit, can coincide of the usual power spectrum of inflationary models with an NS of 0.964. This is a very nice prediction. So even if the model is not an exact power law, it does not mean that it's not consistent with our observations. And to further strengthen this point, let me show you this model-independent reconstruction of the primordial spectrum from Planck data. So you can see here that if you have a power law power spectrum, a red tilted spectrum, it will cross these 2 regions and no problem. So, of course, the usual inflationary spectrum is consistent with Planck observations. But the situation where the spectrum has an increase or a drop here in the end is not discarded by Planck data. Just like our model. It has a drop here in the end. So our model, even if it is not an exact parallel, is not discarded by these reconstructions of Planck data. We are still performing some analysis regarding this model. We are generating the temperature power spectrum of the CMB using the two-fluid model. I have not included it here because we have not finished all the analysis, but I can say the following too. After the inclusion of the temperature analysis, we see that the Bayesian evidence from statistics is essentially the same as the lambda CDA model plus inflation. So again, the temperature data does not discard the two-fluid model. And we found a very interesting consequence that we still need to study, but it's very exciting, so I'll share it with you anyway. That the predicted value for the Hubble constant using the primordial data has increased in comparison with the usual predictions. And this is very nice because there is the well-known Hubble tension cosmology, where if you use data from the primordial universe, the CMB, to fix the Hubble constant, you will get the 67 value, some value, okay? And if you use, for instance, Redshift or late universe service, you get a different value. I think it's 72, something like that. So there's the Hubble tension that the primordial determination of the Hubble constant is different from the late time. But since the prediction for the Hubble constant has increased a bit, maybe there's hope that our model can help to solve that tension. But we still need to be very skeptical and perform the full analysis. By the way, to do set analysis, I forgot to say, but a very important feature of our model is that if you compare the amplitude of the entropy mode, the isocurvature mode, we say, to the amplitude of the adiabatic mode, you see that they differ by about 70 orders of magnitude. This was considered the pivotal scale. So that the entropy mode is very small in comparison to the adiabatic one. And this is very important because it's a prediction of our model. We do not see much of isocurvature modes, entropy perturbation on the CMB, and this is consistent with our model. In multi-field inflation, it's very common to discard the entropy mode altogether, does not consider it using adiabatic initial conditions. We do not need to do this in this model. Predicts that entropy perturbation is. Anyway, like I was saying, to do set analysis that we're still performing, we're doing that on the numerical cosmological library in Column, which, by the way, it's a cosmology library that we have been developing here in Londrina, in Brazil, mostly my advisor and his other students. It's available on this GitHub link, so feel free to check if you want. There are lots and lots of cosmological tools. And all these, the field equation solver for the modes and the Markov chain Monte Carlo, the MCMC methods that we are using to compare the model with data, they were implemented in the C language so that it's very fast. So they're implemented in C, which is nice. But I've been also working on a Python notebook and an example Python notebook, which has all the graphs and analysis that I have just discussed with you, and lots more, and lots of more analysis. So if you do not believe on anything that I said, you can feel free to yourself to download on Column and stuff and check the predictions, the graphs, and the analysis of our model. Feel free to do it. Okay, so just to conclude the presentation, the final considerations, I'll discuss some conclusions in the direction from more general to more specific. So let me start with the model independent conclusions. First, and by the way, totally model independent. We have applied a generalization of the usual WKB approximation and a vacuum state, a generalization of a vacuum state definition for adiabatic interacting system in expanding time, in expanding spaces. This was performed for the first time in all its details on the literature. I don't know about any other work who did this. So it was performed for the first time using this Hamiltonian tensor diagonalization. This has nothing to do with the two-fluid model, but we had to develop and apply this thing to deal with the two-fluid model. And you can apply it on other models that you want on curved spacetime. Mainly the more clear example to me is to multi-field inflation, for instance. You can apply that in that case, okay? So totally model independent, but still model independent, a bit less so. We conclude that a two-fluid matter bounce with dust and radiation leads to a red tilted spectrum that NS equals 0.96 that I have shown you, with small isocurvature perturbations, small entropy perturbations. And this is quite independent of the bouncing mechanism, because in bouncing models, one usually considers only a very fast bounce, so that it's a very fast event and it does not really change the perturbative predictions, because we usually study them. We apply the vacuum initial condition stuff on the past of the contracting phase. So if you consider other types of bounces, the perturbative predictions will not differ much due to these considerations. And since we consider a bouncing model, there is no Trans-Planckian problem because the scale factor had a minimum. It was very far. We calibrate our model so that the scale factor is far from the Planck scale, where more involved quantization techniques may be needed. And there is also no need for reading, because since the universe performed a bounce, it was not that cold to begin with, so that the hot Big Bang evolution can take place without a reheating period. So these problems do not occur in this model. And this was all derived, the two-fluid matter bounce, without any use of exotic matter whatsoever. No funny fields with negative energy and stuff to implement a bounce, nothing like that. And no infotone, by the way, which is kind of exotic matter also. So now for the model-dependent conclusions. First, the primordial singularity may be removed using canonical quantum gravity, which is also very nice because inflation does not solve the singularity problem, but this proposal solves the singularity problem. It's an open problem, this is very nice. And this was performed in canonical quantum gravity. But if you also assume you agree with the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation that we have assumed, there's also no problem from the quantum to classical transition problem. Because in the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation, everything is deterministic, but with non-local quantum effects. So there's no collapse problem and no quantum to classical transition problem. Another problem that is common in the inflationary pattern that does not occur in our. And finally, the to be calculated CMB spectrum, we still need to include on the temperature analysis of polarization, Hubble constant data and stuff. We provide constraints for canonical quantum gravity and the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which I have started a presentation saying that we do not know its domain of validity yet. And this is very interesting because if this model works out and becomes a valid description of nature, this is very nice, so very happy and stuff. But if it does not, we can use this data to discard the model, and we're probing quantum gravity so that we can discard that quantum gravity model. And this is how science works. We need to test this, so that even if this model is wrong, I will at least be happy because I have shown that, okay, at least this path from quantum gravity is wrong, because we have lots of approaches to quantum gravity, which we don't even know if they are right or wrong. So at least we are going to be able to say to me, oh, you are wrong. And I will be, oh, yes, I'm wrong, and I like to be wrong. That's very nice. So these are our conclusions. We are writing a paper about this that is going to be available on arXiv in a few months, I hope. I've been developing this with my advisor, Sandro, Professor Nelson Pinto Neto from CBPF, and Professor Patrick Peter from Institut d'Astrophysik de Paris. So stay tuned for arXiv. Some small acknowledgements. I'd like to thank you, the Grupo de Cosmologia do for lots of discussions and useful comments. Well, Universidade Estadual de Londrina and Programa de Pós-Graduação em Física for the opportunity to follow my PhD studies, and also CAPS for the scholarship. These are my references, and thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you, Dimitrio. Very clear. And wait, I will stop the recording so we can be a bit more relaxed.